All right, I want to. I'm going to continue what we've been sharing on the last several Sundays. I want to take another aspect of communion. I'm going to go a little bit different direction today. I'm going to be teaching a lot from the Old Testament. And I love the Old Testament because there's types and shadows and pictures and things hidden in there that if you don't know it, you just pass right over it. But there's some great things I'm going to talk about. Well, let's start in John chapter 1, and then we will go from there. John chapter 1. To me, the Gospel of John is interesting because it's not like Matthew, Mark, or Luke. In fact, the Gospel of John, historians tell us, was written probably after Paul the Apostle died. It's quite interesting. And John wrote his writings because all of the forerunners, Peter, James, all of them, even Paul, who knew and saw Jesus in the flesh, were all dead. And John wrote some of his in a different style to substantiate that Jesus really did come in the flesh. He was not just some mystical, spiritual idea. He really came. So I love the Gospel of John because he brings out different things. He tells stories that the others don't. I want to read one verse, then we're going to go back to the Old Testament. John chapter 1, verse number 17. For the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. The law came through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Now, throughout this teaching, you're going to see things in twos. And so I'm going to point that out as I go, but you're going to see things in twos that are really fascinating to me. The law came through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus. Now you would think by just the phrase the law came through Moses, that you would say that grace came through Jesus. But he didn't. He said grace and truth. Well, that's interesting to me because if truth came, what was before? If truth came through Jesus, what was before Jesus? Well, it wasn't error, but it wasn't just fulfilled. It wasn't full truth. Jesus brought full truth. Now, let me tell you a story. I grew up in Sunday school, church, all of that, like many of you did. And all my life, early years, I heard about Moses and the great things, the miraculous things that occurred in Moses' life from the very beginning when Pharaoh was killing all the children and they hid Moses and they found him and they took him to the palace and he grew up and became a great leader and crossed the Red Sea and all of that. And how God used Moses miraculously. But then one day, my leaders told me this. My Sunday school teachers, my preachers told me this. That God didn't let Moses into the promised land. Because he did one thing. Now, growing up, they told me that the promised land was heaven. Now that's not the case, but that's what many of us were told. And so I'm thinking as a kid, oh no, Moses did one thing and he didn't get to go to heaven. That's bad news for someone with my personality. Because I always had a bend for kind of that, not the straight and narrow. You know what I'm saying? And I'm thinking, man, God, that's terrible. Moses, all these miraculous things, all these great things, all these wonderful things he does one thing, you don't let him go to heaven. That's what I thought. I want to look at that. Let's go back to Numbers. Numbers chapter 20. Now, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. That's called the Pentateuch. There's a word you don't hear every day. I'm going to say that many times because I just love saying words you don't know. Pentateuch. Written by Moses. Numbers chapter 20. Let's start at verse number 6. Well, 7. Then the Lord, or 7. 6. So Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the door of the tabernacle of meeting, and they fell on their faces. And the glory of the Lord appeared to them. They went to the tabernacle of meeting, fell on their face, and the glory of the Lord appeared. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take the rod, you and your brother Aaron, gather the congregation together, speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield its water. Thus you shall bring water for them out of the rock, and give drink to the congregation and their animals. So Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he commanded him. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, Hear now, you rebels, must we bring water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock twice. There it is again. 2. Struck it 2 times with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their animals drank. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, Because you did not believe me, to hallow me in the eyes of your children of Israel. Therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I've given to them. In other words, because you did this, Moses, you're not going to the promised land. I want to look at some things here that are types, that are descriptions, that are some hidden truth here that I think will apply to us and will bless you and minister to you. Number 1, Moses is a type and represents law. And law will never take you to God's best. Law will never take you into the best that God has for you. A lot of times today, and it's because people have a difficult time with the concepts of grace and truth. And I don't know why, but Christians just have a difficult time with that concept of grace and truth. They believe grace, but they don't want too much grace. And yet Jesus came to bring us grace and truth. So Moses is a type of the law. The law then and the law now will never take you into God's best. The promised land was the land flowing with milk and honey. The promised land was a place where they could have plenty. An abundance was there. And God said, because you disobeyed me in this, you don't get to go. You don't get to go. Now, let me show you something about sin. If you've been in church, it's kind of an unspoken, unwritten rule that there are levels of sin. That some sins are worse than other sins. That some sins are horrible and heinous and awful, and we get up and we preach against these things. Other sins are bad but not terrible. Other sins are just overlooked and we all do them. Right? That's the truth. Have you ever been at your office, the place of your job, the place where you work, and you're looking for something, and you grab a pen that your company provided, and you write something down, and you're busy, you're focused, and you just slip that pen right into your pocket. You get home, you're undressing for the evening, and oh my goodness, there's the company pen. Well, if you don't take it back, you stole it. Didn't you? I mean, technically, did they give you that pen? No, you stole it. But nobody preaching against that. Church of the Redeemer bought this pen. And I take it home every night. When I get through with it, I'll throw it in the trash. Am I going to preach a sin on stealing? No, because everybody does it. You came to church right out here on 425. The speed limit's 55. Did you go over? Do you ever go over? That's sin. You're breaking the laws of the land. But nobody's preaching against speeding. Why? Because everybody does it. But let's talk about, no, I'm not going to talk about other things. Because, man, you mention certain things and, man, people are ready to protest and rally and yes, and scream and yell and get on TV. But the Bible says, in fact, I'll just show it to you. You can see it up here. James chapter 2, verse 10. Talking about the law, that if you stumble at one point, you're guilty of all. You stumble at one point, you're guilty of all. So apart from the religious, traditional mindset of churches and preachers, God says, across the board, if you're going by law, if you break the law at one point, you're guilty of all. Moses is a good example. Look what Moses did in his lifetime. Look what the man accomplished. Look how great a man he was. His one bad day gets frustrated with people. And instead of walking out to the rock and speaking to it, he walks out to the rock and whack, whack. And God says, you're out. Let me show you something in this. The new covenant, which is what we're under, works by speaking. Get Wednesday night CD. I've been teaching on that on Wednesday night. Works by speaking. Old covenant works by striking. Have you ever gone to church and felt like when you left you'd been hit? I can guarantee you 100% of the times that you've left church and felt whipped or beat or smacked, he was preaching law. Because that's what law does. It strikes people. Tammy used to say, because she grew up in the same kind of church I did, she'd leave, and every Sunday she'd say, Mom, I just don't even know if I'm saved anymore. I just don't even know if I'm saved. I gave up. I knew I wasn't saved. I just quit trying. Why? Because law will strike you. Moses, type of the law, disobeyed at one point, disqualified. Now, here's another interesting point. over there in verse 6, Moses and Aaron went in the presence of the assembly to the door of the tabernacle of meeting, where they fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. Now think about that. The glory of God, the Shekinah glory of God manifest in Moses' presence. In the Old Testament, the Shekinah glory would come in a cloud. The Bible talks about in the Old Covenant that when the Shekinah glory would come, nobody could stand up. The priest couldn't stand up. The Shekinah glory, the presence of God, was so great, so tangible, so powerful that in the Old Testament, the priests would fall to the ground. This is where Moses is. He's in the presence of God. And he gets up from there, goes to the people, and verbally assaults them. Look at it. Verse 10. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly before the rock. Now, they just left the presence of God. Hear now, you rebels. How do you go from God's presence to being angry at people? It happens every Sunday. What happens is people preachers primarily, that aren't grounded in new covenant teaching, new covenant thinking. What happens is they'll spend their week and they'll pray a lot, and when people pray a lot, they just by the nature of the thing, they feel more spiritual than everybody else. And if they feel more spiritual, then they're over you. And if they're over you, they can criticize, they can castigate, they can punish you. It happens every Sunday. Folks, a new covenant, when somebody, anybody, preacher, whoever, spends time in the presence of God, something changes them, not into a hard, mean taskmaster, but someone that says, listen, let's get you into God's presence. That's where change happens. That's where you can be transformed. That's where those habits that have nagged you and plagued you for years, that's where they can fall off. That hurt that was done to you years ago, in His presence is where you find forgiveness. What happens with those then, just like Moses, he just came from the tangible presence of God and he's angry at people. He said, "You rebels." He's preaching angry. He's angry at them because he feels superior to them because he's been in God's presence. Not unlike the scribes and the Pharisees in Jesus' day. But that comes from Old Testament, Old Covenant mentality. It's kind of a hierarchy mentality. I've been with God. I know God. He speaks to me. I'm going to let you have it. Nah, it's not about that. We're all on a journey. We're all on a trek with God. Some of us are here, some of us are there, some of us haven't gone very far, some of us have gone a little further, but we're all going together. We're all traveling this thing together. We help one another. Moses, we see, struck the rock. God said, "Speak to it." Moses struck it, and he struck it twice. Now that's interesting to me. Why did Moses strike it twice? after God had already said, go speak to the rock, Moses disobeyed and he struck it, but not just once, twice. Hold your place there in Numbers. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, it's a beautiful picture of why the rock was struck twice. Verse 1, moreover, brethren, I do not want you to be unaware that all of our fathers under the cloud all passed through the sea. We're all baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. All ate the same spiritual food and drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank of the spiritual rock that followed them. That rock was Christ. That rock was Christ. Okay, now the picture's coming clearer. Moses, yes, he disobeyed, but he disobeyed, and what we have in typology is Moses going out to the rock, striking it twice, and the rock being Christ. Why did he strike it twice? What's Jesus going to do at the cross?